My fiancée didn't just leave me, she called to announce she was pregnant by another man and moving in with him. 6 hours later, she was crying on my doorstep, and that's when the real story began. My name is Elliot, I'm 37, and as I write this, I'm sitting at my kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee that went cold an hour ago, trying to understand how a whole future can collapse in a single afternoon. It happened on a Thursday, a little after 2 p.m. My phone buzzed on my desk. Caller ID, Marla, my fiancée of 8 months. We'd been together 3 years. For the last year and a half, she'd lived with me in my house. We were talking about venues and color schemes a week ago. I answered, expecting something ordinary. Her voice, however, sounded like she was reading from a prepared script. Elliot, I need to tell you something. A pause. My stomach tightened without knowing why. I'm moving in with Curtis. We're going to have a baby together. I'll be by tonight to pick up my things. For a second, my brain did not accept the words. Curtis. Her personal trainer. The same man she'd been meeting 3 times a week for the past 4 months. The membership and sessions I had been happily paying for, thinking I was supporting her health goals. The silence on the line stretched out. I could hear my own breathing. Somewhere in the background, I heard a car horn from outside her end, like the world was continuing as usual while mine quietly cracked. Congratulations, I said. The word came out flat, almost emotionless, as if I were confirming a dinner reservation instead of watching my life fracture. That's it? She asked. That's all you have to say? What else is there? I replied calmly. You've made your decision. I thought you'd fight for me. Or at least, react. You're pregnant with another man's child and moving in with him, Marla. There is nothing to fight for. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead. I simply ended the call and put my phone down on the desk. It was strange how calm I felt. Underneath the calm, there was a dull ache and something like nausea, but over it all was a layer of quiet focus. It felt less like a breakdown and more like a storm that had passed and left me with broken pieces to sort through. I sat there for several minutes. No shouting. No punching walls. Just breathing. Then my thoughts shifted from hurt to action. The first thing that came to mind was the engagement ring. I had purchased it 6 weeks earlier from a small jewelry store across town. I picked up my phone again, found the number, and called. The manager, an older man named Harold, answered. I explained, as simply as I could, that my engagement had ended under painful circumstances and asked if there was any possibility of returning the ring. He sighed, and his voice softened. I'm sorry to hear that, sir. Our policy allows returns within 60 days on engagement rings, minus a small restocking fee, as long as it's in good condition. I looked at the ring box on my dresser from where I sat. I'd planned to take a photo of it on Marla's hand sometime soon. Instead, I picked it up, put it in my pocket, and drove straight to the store. The entire interaction took less than 10 minutes. Harold inspected the ring, nodded, processed the return, and printed out the paperwork. I walked out with nearly the full amount back in my account. A few $100s lost to fees. A year of my life saved from being tied to the wrong person. Driving home, the next issue surfaced in my mind, the car. About 10 months earlier, Marla had insisted she needed a reliable vehicle to get to work and appointments. We ended up leasing a car in both our names. The payments came automatically from my account every month. She loved that car. She called it her car. But legally, part of that obligation sat on my shoulders. I parked in my driveway, went inside, opened my laptop, and logged into the leasing company's website. I removed my card from the automatic payment settings. Then I called their customer service line. The representative, a polite woman named Denise, asked how she could help. I need to remove myself as a guarantor on a lease, I said. My fiancé and I have separated, and I will no longer be responsible for the payments. She checked the account and asked a few questions. Mr. Hayes, without your financial information attached, the primary driver will need to requalify based on her own income. If she doesn't meet the requirements, the vehicle may need to be surrendered by the end of the month. I understand, I replied. Please note that I won't be participating as guarantor anymore. Any arrangements will be between your company and her. I hung up. My hands were steady. Then I went through everything else. I started with the Wi-Fi router. I changed the password and the admin login, then updated the password vault where I keep everything organized. Next came the streaming services, all logged out, all new passwords. Streaming, music, cloud storage. Anything with shared access, I reset. I changed the code on the home security system and removed her profile from the app. The smart lock on the front door got a new code as well. Only mine. Her gym membership, yes, the one where she had met Curtis, was charged to a card in my name. I opened that account, navigated to subscriptions, and cancelled it with a single click. Then I called my credit card company. Marla was listed as an authorized user. I asked them to remove her immediately. The representative confirmed, her card would be deactivated, and any future attempts to use the number would be declined. The whole process took perhaps 3 hours. I moved step by step, methodical and oddly composed, closing doors she had walked through, cutting off funds she had assumed would always be there. By around 5 p.m. I was sitting on my living room sofa in a quiet house, the ring returned, the car no longer my problem, the account secured. On paper, Marla and I were still engaged, but in reality, I had already begun the process of untangling my life from hers. There was only one thing left, seeing what she would do next. I didn't wait long. At 6:32 p.m. the doorbell rang. I picked up my phone, opened the security app, and looked at the live camera feed. Marla stood on the porch, mascara streaked down her face, hair pulled back hastily, a suitcase by each leg. She looked like she'd been crying for a while. I walked to the door, slid the chain lock into place, and opened it just a few inches. "Elliot, please," she said immediately, voice shaking. "We need to talk." I looked at her for a moment. She wore a light jacket over a shirt I'd bought her on a trip. Somehow, that detail bothered me more than I expected. "What happened?" I asked calmly. She wiped at her face, even though the tears kept coming. "Curtis. Curtis told me he needs time. He said he's not ready for me to move in yet. He told me I should stay somewhere else for a while. I can't go to my parents like this. I thought maybe I could stay here. Just for a few nights. Until things settle." "Why?" I asked slowly, "would the man who is supposed to be the father of your child not be ready for you to move in?" "It's complicated," she said quickly. "He just needs time to process everything. He didn't expect it all to move so fast." The entitlement in the situation hit me with full clarity. She had ended our engagement, announced she was carrying another man's child, and moved out in her mind. When that new plan collapsed within hours, her first thought was to come back to the life she had just thrown away, as if it were a spare room she could return to whenever she liked. "That sounds like a problem between you and Curtis," I said quietly. "Not between you and me." Her face crumpled. "You can't just cut me off like this, Elliot. I tried to get into the Wi-Fi, and it didn't work. The streaming accounts won't log in. The car payment bounced. My gym card was declined. I don't have access to anything. You told me you were moving in with Curtis and having his child," I answered. "Those responsibilities are no longer mine. They belong to him and to you. Please," she whispered. "Just for tonight. I don't know where else to go. I'm scared. I didn't think it would go like this." "Marla," I said, feeling a strange mix of sadness and clarity, "you made your choice this afternoon. You chose Curtis and the life you believed he would give you. I'm simply respecting that choice." Her expression shifted, from desperation to anger to a kind of frantic disbelief. "This is unreasonable," she said. "You're punishing me for being honest with you." "I'm not punishing you," I replied. "I'm accepting reality. You wanted a different future. Go build it. But you can't build it here, with my support, after rejecting the one we had." She tried again. "I have nowhere to sleep." "You have Curtis," I said gently. "You have your family. You have friends. You're not without options. But I'm not one of them anymore." I closed the door to the narrow gap allowed by the chain, slid the chain back out of its bracket, then closed the door fully and turned the deadbolt. She knocked, then pounded on the door for several minutes, calling my name through tears. I stood in the hallway and listened, breathing slowly. It hurt, but not in the way I would have expected. It was more like pressing on a bruise that I knew would heal, if I stopped letting it be hit again. Eventually, the knocking stopped. I heard the wheels of her suitcases slowly roll down the short path to the sidewalk. Then nothing. The silence that followed was not empty. It was peaceful. The first night after Marla's announcement passed in a kind of heavy quiet. I didn't turn on the television. I didn't scroll through my phone. I just sat, walked around the house a bit, and noticed how many things had small traces of her: hair ties on the bathroom counter, a mug she favored, a half-used bottle of perfume in the hallway. I slept better than I expected. By the time Friday morning arrived, the initial shock had settled into a strange clarity. My life had been split into before and after, and I was now firmly on the after side. I didn't know exactly what the future would look like, but I knew it no longer included me taking care of a person who chose someone else. Marla, on the other hand, did not seem to accept that. Thursday night, after she'd left my doorstep, my phone started buzzing again. But not from the number I had associated with her. Unknown numbers. Several of them. I opened the first message. Elliot, it's me. Please don't block this number yet. I made a terrible mistake. Curtis isn't who I thought he was. I'm staying at a motel right now and I can't afford more than a couple of nights. Please just respond. Another message came a few minutes later, from a different number. I know I hurt you. I know I don't deserve kindness. But I'm pregnant and scared. Please, just talk to me. I took screenshots of each message and saved them in a folder. Then I blocked each number as it came in. There are moments in life when responding feels good in the short term but bad in the long term. I knew if I replied, even once, that door would reopen. She would see it as an invitation to negotiate, to plead, to draw me back into the role of caretaker. I refused to step into that pattern again. Friday morning, I was at my desk when my work phone rang. The display flashed an outside number, one I didn't recognize. Hello, this is Elliot. Elliot, it's Ruth, a woman's voice burst out. What on earth is wrong with you? Ruth was Marla's older sister. We had shared meals, holidays, and long conversations. I had once thought she'd be part of my extended family for the rest of my life. I'm at work, Ruth, I said calmly. What's going on? What's going on? She repeated, incredulous. Marla is devastated. She's practically without a place to live. She told us you changed all the passwords, cut off the car, everything. She's crying non-stop. She told me, I said slowly, that she was moving in with Curtis and that they were having a child together. I accepted that as the end of our relationship. She made a mistake, Ruth insisted. Curtis misled her. He treated her terribly and then pushed her away. She thought she was choosing love. Instead, she got taken advantage of. I'm genuinely sorry she's going through a difficult time, I answered. But that doesn't make it my responsibility to fix. She has nowhere to go, Ruth pressed. You know how our parents are. They're upset, they're judgmental. She feels ashamed. You are the one person she thought would at least make sure she isn't left completely stranded. She has parents, I pointed out. She has you. She has friends. And she has the father of her child. She is not alone unless she chooses to be. Curtis wants nothing to do with her now, Ruth snapped. He told her he needs space. He isn't answering her messages. He's pretending she doesn't exist. I closed my eyes for a second. It didn't surprise me. That is between them, I said at last. Marla decided to end our engagement and pursue a future with Curtis. The fact that he doesn't treat her well doesn't mean I resume the role of fiancé and provider. I'm not an emergency backup plan. Ruth exhaled sharply. You're being incredibly cold. I'm being honest, I replied, keeping my voice level. She chose to leave me. I'm simply allowing that choice to stand. There was a pause on the line, followed by a disbelieving scoff. You know what? She said. I used to think you were a good man. I'm not so sure anymore. Good men, I answered quietly, don't have to let people walk over them to earn the title. I ended the call and, after a moment of hesitation, blocked that number as well. By Friday afternoon, round 2 arrived. My phone lit up again with another unknown caller. Against my better judgment, I answered. Elliot, this is Evelyn, the caller announced immediately, her voice brimming with indignation. Marla's mother. I cannot believe what I'm hearing about how you've treated my daughter. Good afternoon, Evelyn, I said, already knowing how this would go. What have you heard? She's expecting a child, Evelyn declared. She's frightened, vulnerable, and you threw her aside like she meant nothing. You changed the locks. You cut off her access to anything familiar. She's been staying in a motel, for goodness sake. Evelyn, I replied, Marla informed me yesterday that she was leaving me to start a family with another man. I didn't throw her aside. She exited our relationship by her own choice. She realized she was mistaken, Evelyn argued. She realized this other man was not the person she thought he was, and she tried to come back to somewhere safe. To you. And you refused. That is not the same as changing her mind, I said gently. That is experiencing the consequences of a choice. She needs stability right now, she insisted. She is carrying a child. A child whose father is Curtis, I replied. It is his duty to provide that stability, along with hers and yours as her family. I was removed from that responsibility the moment she told me she was starting a new life with him. You are being heartless, she said. I am honestly ashamed of how you are behaving. I am being practical, I answered, feeling more tired than angry. Your daughter decided to end our engagement and pursue another relationship. I will not continue sponsoring a life she planned to share with someone else. There was silence on the line, followed by a low, controlled statement. We misjudged you, Elliot. That may be true, I replied. But it doesn't change what happened. We ended the call shortly after. That number joined the others on my blocked list. The same evening, I met a mutual friend, Owen, for coffee. He arrived looking hesitant, as if he didn't know whether to offer comfort or criticism. I heard something about Marla, he said carefully. She posted a vague message online about being betrayed by people she thought cared about her. Then another about learning who truly stands by you when life gets hard. A few people in our circle started asking questions. I can imagine, I said. What did she tell everyone? That you abandoned her when she needed you most, he replied. That you cut off everything, left her with nowhere to go, even though she's expecting. Some people seem upset on her behalf. I wanted to hear your side. I told him the truth, as plainly as I could, the phone call, the revelation about the child, the moving in with Curtis, the ring return, the car, the accounts, the scene at the door. Owen listened quietly, his brows drawn together. So she really said she was leaving to start a life with him, he asked at the end. She did, I said. Word for word. And then expected you to keep supporting her when it fell apart the same day? Yes. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled. I'm sorry, man. I didn't know all of that. That's a lot. People can believe what they want, I replied. My conscience is clear. When I got home later that night, I spent a couple of hours gathering Marla's remaining belongings. Not everything, just the items clearly and completely hers, clothes in the closet, makeup on the dresser, shoes lined by the door, books she'd brought from her old apartment. I folded and packed them into boxes, labeled them neatly, and stacked them in the spare room. If she wanted them, she could arrange through someone else to pick them up. I had no desire to see her again at my doorway with suitcases and explanations. The house felt different with her things boxed away. Quieter, yes, but not empty. There was a sense of space returning, as if I had been sharing my home with someone who was already halfway out the door, and only now, after she fully stepped out, could the room breathe again. No more wondering who she was messaging. No more paying for gym sessions I now knew had led her straight into another man's arms. No more silent suspicion and forced cheerfulness. Just me. And a life I could rebuild from honest ground. About a week after the call that ended our engagement, I thought the storm might be quieting. I was wrong. On Monday morning, as I was settling into my workday, the receptionist walked into my office holding a rigid white envelope. This came by certified mail for you, she said. I frowned, accepted it, and noticed Marla's handwriting on the front. My name. My office address. The return address was blank. I waited until the door was closed, then slid a finger under the seal and pulled out several pages of lined paper. Her handwriting filled them edge to edge. I sat down and began to read. The letter started with a long, emotional reflection. She wrote that she never intended to hurt me, that her feelings for Curtis had confused her judgment, that she had felt neglected in certain ways and thought this new relationship would bring her the passion she believed she was missing. She described herself as lost, overwhelmed, and terrified. She expressed regret, but not so much for what she had done, as for how difficult the aftermath had become. Then came the key part. She explained that she was staying in a small, inexpensive motel outside of town, that the nightly rate was draining the little savings she had, that she couldn't face going home to her parents permanently. She wrote that she was trying to keep a positive outlook for the sake of the baby, but that the stress was affecting her sleep and appetite. Finally, in the last paragraph, she came to her proposal. She suggested that, because I had once loved her and we had planned a life together, it was only fair and kind that I cover the cost of her motel stay and basic expenses, until she could get back on her feet. She also proposed that we attend couples counseling together to process this betrayal and rebuild trust. I stared at that word for a long time, betrayal. According to her, me refusing to continue funding her life after she chose another man was the true betrayal. I folded the letter slowly, thinking. It was both astonishing and somehow completely consistent with the pattern I had been seeing, a belief that I was meant to be her permanent safety net, no matter what choices she made. That afternoon, I met my friend Gordon for lunch. Gordon is not only a close friend but also an attorney, and I wanted his perspective, not because I feared a lawsuit, but because I wanted to make sure I handled everything appropriately. We sat down in a quiet corner of a small restaurant. I slid the envelope across the table. Take a look, I said. Curious what you think. He unfolded the letter and read in silence. Halfway through, his eyebrows shot up. By the last paragraph, he let out a short, disbelieving laugh. She really wrote this? He asked, tapping the page. And sent it to your workplace? She did, I confirmed. He shook his head slowly. So she ends the engagement, tells you she's having another man's child, tries to move in with him, and when that goes wrong, she asks you to pay for her room and help her process your supposed betrayal? That's the situation, I said. Gordon leaned back, exhaling. From a legal standpoint, this is actually useful. Keep this letter somewhere safe. If she ever tries to claim you abandoned her or made promises, this document clearly shows how she viewed the situation. She's basically admitting she left and then expected you to continue supporting her voluntarily. I had planned to keep it anyway, I replied. Also, he added, you are under no obligation to pay for anything. Emotionally, morally, legally, you owe her nothing beyond basic respect as another human being, which you've already shown by not lashing out publicly. I just want clean separation, I said. That's all. Then keep doing what you're doing, he said. Calm, consistent, no engagement. The very next day, my phone rang again, this time from my bank's fraud department. Mr. Hayes, this is Clara from Security Services, a woman's voice said politely. We've noticed some unusual activity on one of your credit accounts and wanted to verify it with you. My stomach sank, but I remained composed. What kind of activity? There have been multiple attempts to use a card ending in 0937 at various merchants, she explained. All were declined. We wanted to confirm whether you had authorized these charges. I knew that number. It was the card on which Marla had been an authorized user until I removed her name. No, I said. I did not authorize those attempts. My former fiancée used to have a card under that account, but she's no longer authorized to use it. We recently separated. I see, Clara replied. We'll make a note on the account that any future attempts from that old card are unauthorized. If any manual approvals are requested, we'll decline them. Thank you, I said. I appreciate the call. When I hung up, I sat back in my chair for a moment. There was a subtle but important shift in how I saw things. Marla wasn't just hoping for grace or asking softly for help. She was actively trying to use resources that no longer belonged to her, attempting to override the clear boundary I had placed. I called the credit card company directly afterward to confirm what the bank had done and to double-check that no charges had slipped through before the removal. They reassured me everything was under control. Another door closed. Another piece of the old connection severed. On Wednesday of that same week, I came home from work to see two familiar figures on my front step via the security camera, Evelyn and Leon, Marla's parents. They rang the bell and waited, looking anxious. They rang again. I watched for a minute from the hallway, then opened the door. Elliot, we need to talk, Evelyn said immediately. Her tone was firm, but her eyes were red, as if she had been crying earlier. Come in, I said, stepping aside. They entered and stood in the living room, both looking equal parts uncomfortable and determined. Leon cleared his throat. Son, he began, using the term he'd once used warmly, we know things have gone very wrong. Marla made a poor decision. But we don't think the answer is to cut her off completely. She's still the woman you were going to marry. She's also the woman who told me she was leaving to raise another man's child, I replied evenly. Evelyn folded her arms. People make mistakes, she said. Sometimes terrible ones. But when someone is expecting, when there's a child involved, you have to consider more than just your own feelings. I agree, I said. There is more than my feelings to consider. There are also the responsibilities of the child's parents. The father, Curtis, and the mother, Marla, along with both of you as grandparents. Curtis has disappeared from the picture, Leon said, his jaw tightening. Marla says he's refusing to answer, refusing to help, denying that the child is his. She has no partner in this except us. And you, if you choose. And you think, I said carefully, that because I once planned to marry her, should now take on the role that he is abandoning? We think you loved her, Evelyn replied. We think you cared about her deeply. We think the decent thing to do is not to let her face this alone. I let the quiet sit for a moment before answering. Let me put it another way, I said. If I had called Marla and said, I'm leaving you for another woman. She and I are going to have a baby together. I'm moving out tonight, but if it doesn't work out, I'll come back and expect you to pay my rent, feed me, and help me process your betrayal. Would you advise her to welcome me back and support me? Leon opened his mouth, then closed it. Evelyn hesitated. That's not quite the same, she said eventually. It is exactly the same, I answered gently. I am not angry anymore. I am not seeking to punish her. I am simply choosing not to reward decisions that disregarded our commitment. Leon sighed and ran a hand over his face. We're not asking you to marry her now, he said. We're asking you to be kind. I am being kind, I said. I have not spoken ill of her publicly. I have not tried to turn friends against her. I have not shared any details she hasn't already revealed herself. But I will not reopen my home or my wallet to someone who treated me as a backup option. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears. So that's it? You're just going to stand aside and watch her struggle? I'm going to stand aside, I said quietly, and let her walk through the consequences of her choices. I wish her health, and I hope she finds stability, for herself and for the child. I truly do. But that stability will not be built on my life anymore. They tried for another 15 or 20 minutes, appeals to compassion, to shared history, to a sense of duty. The conversation went in circles. I repeated, calmly, that I understood their concern, but my answer would not change. Eventually, they saw that. They left with tight expressions and minimal words. As I closed the door behind them, I felt a mixture of sadness and relief. It is a strange thing to realize that, to protect your own future, you sometimes have to accept being misunderstood in someone else's story. Part 4 of 5, the gym, the car, and the slow descent. The day after Marla's parents came to my door, I went to the gym, as I always did on Thursdays. Not the high-end place where she had met Curtis, but a modest, familiar one I'd been going to for years. I had just finished a set with the free weights when I heard my name. Elliot. I turned and saw Marla standing near the end of the rack. She looked different, tired, thinner, with dark circles under her eyes. Her posture was tense, like she wasn't sure whether I would walk away or listen. I need 5 minutes, she said. Please. I looked at the clock on the wall. You have 3, I replied. Start now. Her mouth trembled slightly, but she began. I know I caused this, she said. I know I hurt you deeply. I thought I knew what I wanted, and I was wrong. Curtis lied to me. He told me his relationship was over, that he was serious about building a life with me. He said he was ready for a family. I believed him. 2 minutes, I said quietly. He's married, Elliot, she continued, words spilling faster. He never intended to leave his wife. When I told him about the baby, he said he needed time. Then he told me I was pressuring him. Then he told me it would be better if we took a break. A break, she repeated bitterly. I have nowhere permanent to stay. I'm exhausted. I feel sick all the time. I miss you. I miss our life. I wish I could undo everything. 1 minute, I said. Tears gathered in her eyes. I still love you, she said. I know that sounds unfair after what I did, but it's true. What we had, it mattered. We can work through this. People come back from worse. We can go to counseling. We can rebuild trust. You don't have to be the father, but you can still be with me. We can start fresh. Time's up, I replied softly. She stared at me, waiting, as if expecting me to say I'd been waiting for those words. Marla, I said, you did not trip and accidentally fall into a different life. You made choices. You chose to meet someone else in secret. You chose to act on that interest. You chose to continue, even when it led to pregnancy. And you chose to call me and declare that you were moving in with him and having his child. None of that was confusion. It was a series of decisions. I know, she whispered. I know that now. But people can grow from their mistakes. Mistakes, I said, are often things we do without understanding the cost. You understood some of the cost. You were simply convinced the reward would be worth it. You believed Curtis was an improvement, a better future. If he had been what you imagined, you would be unpacking boxes in his place right now, planning a nursery, and I would be nothing more than a story you tell friends about your previous engagement. That's not true, she said quickly. You're twisting. I'm being honest, I interrupted. If Curtis had embraced you and this child, you would not be standing here telling me you still love me. You would be telling yourself you had made the right choice. The only reason you are here is that your plan fell apart. She shook her head, tears spilling over now. You don't understand how scared I am, she said. I wake up in a different place every few days. I don't know how I'll pay for anything long-term. I don't know what kind of life this baby will have. I thought you, of all people, would not stand by and watch me struggle. I understand fear, I replied. I understand regret. I even understand wishing we could rewind time. But I will not volunteer to live a life built on the idea that I am the emergency exit. I am not here to rescue you from the consequences of choosing someone else over me. Her voice softened. Can't we at least stay in touch, she asked. You were my best friend once. You have friends, I said. You have family. You have the father of your child. Those are the people who need to be your circle now. I picked up my towel. You'll need to find a new gym, I added quietly. This one is my space. I don't want to see you here again. I walked toward the exit without looking back. My heart felt heavy, yes, but also strangely steady. The line I had drawn was painful, but clear. That night, my phone vibrated with another message from a number I recognized as Ruth's. "You are a heartless man. Marla is sleeping in her car. She is pregnant and exhausted, and you refuse to show the slightest bit of compassion." I read it once, then replied. Marla chose Curtis to share her life and to be the father of her child. The consequences of that choice belong to them, not to me. Then I blocked her number permanently. In the days that followed, little pieces of information reached me through mutual acquaintances. I never asked for updates, but people volunteered them anyway. It was as if everyone needed to process the drama by telling someone who was clearly part of the story. I learned that Marla had indeed spent several nights sleeping in the car, the least one we had originally gotten together. She tried to stretch her motel budget by alternating between nights indoors and nights in the driver's seat, reclining as far as she could, wrapping a coat around herself. It did not last long. One morning, about a week later, a tow truck arrived at the motel parking lot. The leasing company had made their final decision. Without my credit backing her and without sufficient proof of income on her part, the agreement couldn't continue. She watched as they attached the car to the truck and drove away. That detail came from a mutual friend who happened to be there. He described how shaken she looked, standing on the sidewalk with a small suitcase and a backpack, suddenly far more on her own than she had imagined. Eventually, she did what seemed inevitable: she called her parents again. After some tense conversations and conditions, they agreed to let her move back into her childhood bedroom. From what I heard, she arrived expecting a kind of soft landing. She imagined that, if they opened the door, they would also open their wallets, that they would provide the kind of lifestyle she had grown accustomed to with me. Dinners out. Shopping trips. Little comforts. Instead, she got a bed, meals, and a roof over her head. No luxuries. No endless spending. And plenty of lectures. Her parents, while critical of me, were also not gentle with her. They reminded her that she had broken an engagement, created a child with a man who was not free, and depended on someone else's resources without planning for independence. Arguments became frequent. The house grew tense. In the meantime, Curtis did not vanish entirely. Under pressure from Marla and the reality of the pregnancy, he agreed to a prenatal paternity test. Rumors circulated that he had told his wife from the beginning that Marla was exaggerating, or even lying, about the child being his. The test results came back with a clear answer: the baby was his. Curtis's response was not to suddenly step up and become the partner she had imagined. Instead, he hired an attorney. His priority, it seemed, was to protect his assets, limit his obligations, and present himself in the best possible light to his wife and, eventually, to a court. His wife, upon learning the truth, asked him to leave their home. They were officially separated, according to the whispers. But Curtis's concern was not building a family with Marla. It was minimizing any long-term financial or legal impact. So now, Marla found herself in a place that might have seemed unthinkable when she made her first choice: living with her parents, working part-time, carrying the child of a man who was treating her less as a partner and more as a legal situation to manage. And I? I continued going to work, paying my bills, tidying the spaces in my house where her presence had once been constant and now was entirely gone. The quiet no longer felt empty. It felt intentional. I hadn't orchestrated any elaborate plan for revenge. I hadn't plotted to humiliate her or spread rumors. All I had done was step back and allow cause and effect to run their course. Sometimes, that is all it takes. 3 months after the phone call that split my life into before and after, the dust had mostly settled, at least on my side. Marla's situation, however, continued to evolve in ways I heard about only through scattered updates. I did not follow her online. I did not ask mutual friends for news. But people talk, and when something dramatic happens, it tends to find its way to anyone even loosely involved. I heard that Curtis's wife had officially filed for separation, then for divorce. I heard that Curtis, through his lawyer, had offered Marla a modest support proposal once the baby was born, enough to satisfy the minimum legal requirements, but far from the supportive partnership she had once envisioned. I also heard that there were already quiet murmurs about custody arrangements. Curtis wanted involvement, but on his terms and schedule. He was fighting against anything that might significantly alter his lifestyle. All the while, Marla's pregnancy progressed. Her parents worried about her health. They took her to appointments, helped her with basic needs, but tension remained high. She had traded one form of dependence for another, except now there was no romantic affection attached to it, only obligation and fatigue. None of this brought me joy in a cruel sense. I did not lie awake smiling at the idea of her difficulties. But there was a certain sense of justice in seeing reality assert itself. She had gambled our future on the idea that Curtis would be an improvement in every way, more exciting, more thrilling, more emotionally engaging. The cost of that gamble turned out to be far higher than she'd anticipated. About 6 weeks before her due date, I had a brief, unexpected encounter that brought everything into sharp focus. I was leaving a small coffee shop a few blocks from my office, paper cup in hand, when I saw a familiar figure across the street. It took a second for my brain to register that it was Marla. She was significantly pregnant by then, her coat unbuttoned over a rounded stomach. She had 2 grocery bags in each hand, and one of the bags looked like it might tear. She paused at the curb, shifted her weight, and winced slightly, as if her back hurt. For a moment, standing there with my coffee, I felt something I could only describe as a quiet ache. Not longing, not desire to go over and talk, but a recognition of shared history. We had once lain awake together talking about children, names, schools, values. We had imagined a future that was now utterly gone. That past did not justify what she had done. It did not mean I owed her a return to my life. But it was still part of my story. I watched her cross the street slowly, balancing the bags and the life growing inside her. For a heartbeat, I wondered what would happen if I walked over, offered to carry the groceries, asked how she was. I imagined the conversation, the possible tears, the likelihood it would be interpreted as an invitation back into my life. Then the memory rushed in, her voice on the phone saying, "I'm moving in with Curtis. We're going to have a baby together." The calm way I had said, "Congratulations," knowing something had shattered that could never be undone. I took a sip of coffee, turned the corner, and went back to work. A few days later, a coworker approached me at my desk. "Hey, Elliot," he said. "Do you know a woman named Ruth?" My chest tightened slightly. "Yes," I said. "She's my former fiancée's sister." "Why?" "She reached out to me on social media," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Said we work together. She asked if I could pass along a message." I knew, before he even said it, what kind of message it would be. "She said Marla is really struggling," he continued. "That the baby is coming soon, and there are so many expenses, and you used to care about her, so maybe you'd be willing to help with some costs. Just for the baby's sake." I nodded slowly. "Did she ask you to say anything back?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "If you don't mind relaying it exactly, tell her that Marla chose Curtis to be the father of her child. The responsibilities and expenses that come with that choice belong to them." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I'll pass it on," he said quietly. That was the last attempt anyone made to draw me back into that part of the story. As for my life, it didn't transform overnight into something dazzling. There were no instant miracles, no sudden perfect endings. There was, instead, a gradual rebuilding. The house, once shared, now felt genuinely mine. I rearranged furniture. I changed some decor. I donated a few items that carried too much emotional weight. I opened windows more often. The space began to feel not like a place where something had ended, but where something new could begin. Financially, I felt lighter. No more funding gym sessions that concealed an affair. No more covering multiple streaming services for someone who would watch shows while messaging another man. No more leases I wasn't fully comfortable with. My accounts reflected only my responsibilities and my choices. Emotionally, there was healing. Some nights, I still replayed conversations in my head, wondering if there had been signs I missed earlier, if there were moments I could have acted differently. But each time, I came back to the same conclusion: no amount of different behavior on my part would justify or erase the decisions Marla made on hers. About 2.5 months after everything fell apart, a friend invited me to a small gathering. There, I met Dina, a 34-year-old architect with an easy laugh and a calm confidence about her. She asked me what I did, then asked about my hobbies. She spoke about her own work, her love of old buildings and drawing, her weekend hikes. It was not a dramatic, movie-style meeting. It was simple. Real. We exchanged numbers at the end of the evening. A week later, we had coffee. A week after that, dinner. There were no urgent declarations, no grand promises. Just 2 adults, both with some history, both trying to build something honest. One thing stood out early: she was fiercely independent. She talked about her own bills, her own projects, her own goals. Not once did she casually assume I would pay for things beyond a normal date. Not once did she hint that I was a stepping stone to a lifestyle she couldn't manage alone. Being with her felt peaceful. Balanced. I could see her as a partner, not as someone to rescue or maintain. Looking back now, months later, I can say this. The most satisfying part of what happened was not that Marla's life became difficult. It was that I finally chose myself, over the role of provider, over the fear of being judged, over the temptation to step back into something broken because it was familiar. The revenge, if it can be called that, wasn't a dramatic act. It wasn't public humiliation or clever schemes. It was simply refusing to shield someone from the natural outcome of decisions they made freely. Marla wanted Curtis and the excitement he represented. She wanted the thrill, the rush, the promise of something new and intense. She got Curtis, his child, and the reality of who he truly was, a man who would step away when things became complicated, a man who prioritized his comfort over his commitments. She gambled on an upgrade. The cost of that gamble was losing the steady, if imperfect, life we had together. The result was not the future she imagined, but it was fair, in the sense that it followed directly from her choices. Sometimes, real justice doesn't come in the form of a dramatic confrontation. Sometimes, it looks like this. You step aside. You stay calm. You refuse to be a safety net for someone who cut the rope themselves. And you go on to build a better life, not out of spite, but out of respect for your own worth. That, more than anything else, is what brings peace at the end of this story. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.